Extraordinary, corrupt, and unconstitutional is how the new feature of Truth Social, where individuals can pay extra for early access to the president's posts, is described in a new lawsuit filed today. Intercept Media and the Freedom of the Press organization are suing Donald Trump over the new service. The suit says this scheme is profoundly corrupt. The president stands to gain financially by giving market-moving government information to those who are willing and able to pay his personal company. I want to bring in legal analyst and former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance. She is now a professor at the University of Alabama School of Law. Plus, writer and editor for Protect Democracy, Amanda Carpenter, is here. Donald Sherman is still with us. His group crew brought the lawsuit trying to stop Donald Trump from profiting off advance access to his posts. Donald, tell me about this suit.
Well, once again, the president is selling access. This time it relates to market moving information, which include Truth Social posts from the president and other government officials that have a significant impact on our economy and on small investors. More importantly, for our clients, the Intercept and the Free Press Foundation, granting this kind of preferential access to the president's public statements to paid subscribers violates their First Amendment rights, which guarantee Americans equal access to the president's public announcements. Then it also violates the Fifth Amendment, which prohibits the government from imposing extortionate or unreasonable conditions on the availability of government benefits. And I think having to pay $100,000 per month to quickly access the president's official statements certainly qualifies as that.
Joyce, I believe that you and I were on maybe a week or two ago when this news came out, and I said to you, how is this legal? And you're like, I'm not sure that it is. Of the arguments that are being made in this suit, which do you think is most likely to persuade a judge?
Well, all of them, for exactly the reasons, that we just pointed out. In any other universe, this whole scenario would be laughable. The idea that a president would sell access to market-moving information, which is how they advertise this. There's reporting that they've already got 10 subscribers, so they're making about $1 million a month off of this already. It's insane. And so Crew, when they call it profoundly corrupt in their complaint, they hit the nail on the head. There are legitimate First and Fifth Amendment claims here, both free speech, free access claims, as well as the equal protection claims. I would expect to see a judge rule that this is unconstitutional for all of the above reasons.
So, Amanda, a question that I have occasion to ask you more often than I would like, where's the outrage, particularly on the part of Republicans, of corruption that is just happening out in the open?
Well, you don't see it from his MAGA defenders in Congress, unfortunately. But I do think this is one of those stories where people saw it. They instinctively knew there was something wrong with that. I think the suit are definitely strong in First Amendment and Fifth Amendment grounds. But on the conflict of interest angle, the idea that a president is making a commercially viable product off his public speech that is supposed to be in the public interest. He created his own network. He is not using official government channels, which everybody has equal access to. He created a private social media channel that he is selling access to off his public speech. I mean, people know there's something wrong with that. You shouldn't be able to monetize the presidency in this kind of fashion. He is making the policy and also profiting off the policy. And this is just such a brazen instance of it. I think you can see in other arenas, but especially when it comes to this, when he is making policy statements and then making money personally off those statements, it's particularly outrageous.
Well, and especially because there sort of can be a relationship that moves both ways, right? Where there is an incentive on his part to begin to calculate some of his policies based on the way in which they move the markets. Donald, can you give us a sense of timeline here? What happens next with this suit?
Well, the next thing that happens is that the president and the other defendants in the case have to respond. Certainly, we look forward to this case moving forward as quickly as possible. But I think, as the other panelists said, this is not complex, and you don't need to be an ethics expert or a legal expert to understand the issues here. The problem with the president selling access to his public statements, which are in fact government records. And so we are hopeful that the court will move quickly, and certainly we're going to use all of the legal tools at our disposal to move this case along as quickly as we can, so that we can get resolution on behalf of our clients, and so that this corrupt scheme that the president has orchestrated with his private business is unwound.
One of the things I have trouble wrapping my mind around, Joyce, given that this is not my area of expertise, is that we are talking about milliseconds, and that milliseconds in this case can amount to millions. Can you give us just a sense of the size and scale of the corruption, even if it is only 10 who are currently subscribed to the service?
You know, the number of subscribers may seem small, but it's absolutely immense when you think about the kind of information this president traffics in on social media. There's no way of knowing how he might evolve into this new profit model and continue to monetize the presidency. But there are all sorts of decisions, perhaps some that impact the prediction markets that have cropped up around political decisions, but perhaps, and I think more on the darker side of the equation, decisions about military movement, decisions about policy changes, decisions about what companies might be getting contracts in what area of government. The real problem here is it's absolutely unbounded in scope in terms of what the president might choose to reveal and who might then have for pay access to it.